So one of the problems that we have in today's society, which is not too different from what other societies and cultures and people in time have experienced, is the issue of hope or hopelessness. What is hope? Hope, simply put, is what your expectation is of the future. No one knows what is going to happen in the future in the same way that no one is really able to predict the weather. We just recently had a couple of hurricanes come through the south, and there are all sorts of models that predict where the hurricane is going to go, what it's going to do, what the gravity or the grandeur, how great the hurricane is going to be. All these different ways we have to measure and attempt to predict, but it's certainly not an exact science, and that's why we have several different models. Same thing with the stock market for those people who are familiar with investing. No one really knows if the stock market is going to go up, if it's going to go down. Traditionally, it's always roughly 9-10% increase every year. Some years are 30%, some years are 20%, some years there are losses, but over time there's usually 10% growth in the market. But the truth is, no one really knows what's going to happen with it, what is to be of the future. But the reality is, everyone has an expectation of what they think is going to happen. And that's what we would call hope. Hope isn't simply wishful thinking or the idea that you don't have a reason to believe something's going to happen in the future, but you sure hope that it does. Really, a more thorough definition or just understanding of the idea of hope is you have a reason to believe this is what the future will be like. And that is incredibly important because what you believe about the future necessarily determines how you will experience the present. So, and it's a little bit more complicated than that too, because there are all sorts of people who claim that they have a hope for the future, but they don't necessarily live in the present as if they actually believe that hope. What do I mean by that? For example, there are people from a, quote, secular background whose hope would be progress, innovation with science and technology, not just within the medical field, but within all things, in which we would build a better city, society, people, and hope that we would get to a point where the problems that we are experiencing are at least alleviated, if not completely cured and solved. However, if you notice from our friends in the more secular space, they don't live as if that is actually enough or sufficient for them. And we're going to have another episode coming later where we'll dive more into that. And so if you want it to be critiqued or to critique secularism, people from a more atheist background, you might want to investigate if the hopes they actually have for the future are solid and fulfilling hopes, and if they actually accomplish what it is that they want within the present. To give another example of what I mean by this, someone can claim to be a Christian and believe that they will be saved, go into heaven, that they will be part of a glorified state, those promises and descriptions that are at the end of the book of Revelation about how there's not going to be any more tears or sorrow. We're going to be face to face with God. Someone can claim they believe those things, but you notice about how they live in the present, you wonder if they actually believe it. You might say and wonder, I have a hope for different things, whether it's heaven, whether it's a secular background, that we will progress to a certain point with our society and survive better. Again, we'll talk more about this in another episode. But the reality is we all think we know what our hope is, but deep down I think most people can be confused by it. And hopefully I'm not being too confusing by it. What I mean to say is you need to ask yourself the question, what do you really hope for? And the only way for you to know what it is you hope for about the future is to see how it is that you are living today. If you will think to yourself, what is it that makes me the most happy? What is it that makes me the most sad? Where do I really invest the most of my money, and I'm not talking about, well, I spend the most on rent, mortgage payment, and food and things to keep me alive. I'm really talking about the other money that you have to use. What do you prioritize? Do you think about other people and try to be generous with your income where you can be generous, for example? Where do you spend the most time that you can, especially with leisure time or time outside of work? What captivates most of your thoughts and your imaginations? That's all another way of saying, what do you really get excited about, whether for good or for bad, happy or sadness? If you can answer those questions and be a little introspective, it's going to give you an understanding about how it is you actually act in the present, in the moment, day to day, and that will be telling about what you actually believe about the future and therefore what your hope is. Because there's a lot of people, as I already said, whether you come from a secular atheistic background or even a Christian background, with how you act presently day to day doesn't always line up with what you claim to believe about the future. So think about this. If you actually had a hope that at the end of time, everything's going to be made right, that there is going to be a judgment, and all the people who committed horrible atrocities and evils in the world that got away with it. And we all know that there are people who do evil things within our world, and there is no judgment for them. There is no justice. Those who have had horrible injustices performed upon them, unethical, criminal things, and the people who did it to them get away with it. What if you actually believe that at the end of the time, those people who did those wrongs, who got away with it, won't get away with it? But even moreover, the people who even did wrongs but sought repentance, sought to seek out forgiveness, they sought to reconcile and to show love and to seek out mercy. What if those people actually received redemption and entered into a space where they could actually meet the people that they once wronged and openly embrace them? What if you actually believed that despite all of the pain and suffering that happens in our world, that has happened in the past, that is happening today, and will continue to happen in the future until a moment when Jesus comes and sets everything straight and again at the end of the book of Revelation says, makes all things new? If you actually believe that, how would you act day to day? How would you act in the present? What would your attitude be like when good things happen or when bad or adverse, when you meet adversity? Versus if you actually believe that at the end of time there is nothing, that when you die you just enter in a state of unconsciousness, there is nothing beyond this life. What would be the appropriate attitude and actions that you would carry around day to day? Understanding that if it is actually true that when we go on to die, there's nothing left to experience, with what purpose do I have to do anything? And does it not all just come out in the wash? Whether I'm a good person or a bad person, whether I'm successful in life or I'm a failure at life, by whosever standards we're judging by, if there's really nothing to hope for or this expectation in the future, that there is something there, does it not logically follow that anything that I now do in the present just is meaningless? But there too, if you're a person who says, no, I believe in God. No, I believe in Jesus, the church, the Bible, and these things and so forth. But you don't really live day to day as if you have this wonderful expectation to say, as bad as things can possibly get, they're all going to be worth it. But not just that, you could also say, as good and wonderful things maybe are going on right now in the present, they pale in comparison to what's waiting. Hope is really important. And we, as some people have said, are hope-based creatures. And everyone lives and goes about their lives predicated on what they actually believe the future is going to hold. And it's really important for you to think about, what do you actually believe Better yet, the only way for you to know what you actually believe is see, well, how is it that I actually live? And does that point to something? Meaning this, if you try to take care of the poor, you take care of the sick, you take care of those who are needy, unless you believe that there's something that's going to eventually redeem the whole situation of the pain and suffering and the evil that is within the world, does it really matter what good we do or evil that we do if there is nothing in the future beyond this life? Or maybe the reason that you actually are doing good is because there's just something that's almost innate within human nature that says, I see someone who is in need, and there's just something within me that says, I ought to go help that person. Because why? Well, as a Christian, I would argue you are seeing another human being in the same way in which God created us, all in His image, all in due dignity and respect, and with this actual appreciation and expectation that we are going to have love that never ends. Because why is it that you help people at the very base level? There's something that we call love. And we all seek it, we all desire it, and have this firm belief that we don't want it to end. Because if it does end, does that not make it vanish or turn into ash or be like a vapor? Does it not make it almost shallow? Because we can't actually imagine, and if we pay attention, we don't really live like this. We don't live as if we actually believe our life is so limited, we'll have so much time, and then after that, there's just nothing. I dare say, if we think about it long enough, we live as if there is actually something that's going to keep us on, and we have this wonderful desire, I would call it, for love that is everlasting. And if we come to understand that, what do we really, at the end of the day, all people truly hope for? That we are accepted, that we are a part of something that is greater than ourselves, and that we feel true commitment and this sort of intimacy, of brotherhood, of family, of people being around us who truly care and want to talk with us and listen to things that we have to say that make us feel as if we matter and have meaning and purpose and something to add to a community. To put that all in one word, you could say love. And if there is no love, if there is no reality that is beyond this life of where we can continue in that, well, then by the time we die, it is as if we never existed, and you have to wonder, does it even make any sense for me to strive to be a good and loving person instead of just a hedon who is just after his own pleasures and living selfishly? And if we actually lived that way, would that not make the world a worse place? Therefore, I think we have reason to believe that the reason that we do good things, to take care of the poor, to take care of the needy, to do things that are loving, is because there is this real concept and reality of love, and we could call that God Himself. Now, in the next episode, we're going to compare and contrast a little bit more in detail. Fine. Here is the relatively new, secular, more atheistic understanding of what it is we're trying to hope for and the progress that we're trying to make in history. And is that really worth it? I've kind of already hit it on it, but a little bit more detail versus what is really the Christian hope? And why is it at the end of the day, the one thing that we all are really striving after is something that is like love that is everlasting, that does not fail, that does not end, and why we have to have it. Again, already pointed out, if you don't have it, doesn't that make the world a worse place? We want the world to be a better place, but how can we rationally have a belief and reasonably believe it in such a way that we actually live day to day as if it is actually true, and to believe that it's true? So think about those things until we enter our next episode. Ask yourself the question, what do I really hope for? How do I know what I really hope for? Well, how do you live day to day? Hey, thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, leave us a like. If you have a comment, leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you're local to our area, we invite you to send us a direct message. We'd love to talk to you more about the gospel. See you next time.